la, la, la.
Tell me when you're ready. Yes, got it. Good. So I remember Dave once said, and I've used it, and it's been awesome. Whenever you get a phone call from a solicitor, right? Take the call and act all excited and just say, "Oh my God, I won the big screen TV, the color TV. I won it. Oh my God, really? What do I have to do?" And just act enthusiastic till they get exhausted and hang up on you.
I
love that
it.
it's a big screen colored TV. Like it was like The Price is Right, 1972.
Totally. Yeah, that's exactly. I love that. And I mean, I think, maybe because we're recording now, we don't talk about who did it or whatever, but a mysterious audio tape of Dave testing the phone systems in the studio has surfaced, and they're using it on the official channel. Walter and company are using it on the official channel, where it's Dave making prank phone calls to different places.
Oh, really?
And it's appeared. A friend of ours that may have found something in the archives and handed it over. And if you look on the official Letterman channel, they've got, I think he called a couple of places, just to a book publisher, and there's another one that's on there, and I think they got over an hour's worth of these things, and they're going to be releasing them.
That's so great. Yeah, there's always another show going on behind the scenes there with Dave. So that's wonderful. Yeah, I'm so excited that he did that and is embracing his archive.
Yep.
The way Johnny Carson's nephew did a good job. Although it's funny, Johnny Carson's nephew put it out there and was aggressively licensing it, but I don't know that there's a website. The way Dave's is so freaking good. I love the yellow font that just kind of announces, and I like that they're not shying away from putting stuff up there like right after someone passed away. Like in the olden days, I remember like the show would never really exploit, and they're not exploiting it now. It's out there. Might as well, if Ray Liotta passes away, people's natural inclination is to kind of go and do a deep dive for 24 hours because he's trending and people pass clips around. So why not Dave do it with the highest quality? Because the other thing I noticed that Walter's doing with Dave is these things look pristine. I mean, as good as they're going to look, especially the NBC stuff, which might, I think Shecky, I'll be, for you listeners, viewers out there, I'll be invoking the name Shecky a lot. It's not Shecky Green, it's Rick Sheckman that I'm referring to. But Shecky would tell you some horror stories of shows disappearing, and only existing, some of the old shows just on 3/4-inch tape, which is insane.
Well, we have a real opportunity here, in the idea that, and that's what this show and other shows that are out there too, that are doing to conserve this body of work and preserve it and share it and let it grow and continue on. Because, like, when I think of guys like Chappelle, who arguably are, the number one at the zenith of their career potentially, or they're at a peak. Who knows how high the peaks are going to get moving forward? But and there are guys like that who worship Dave, guys who are on top now, and their first appearance was on Late Show or whatever. So you have this opportunity, like you said, with legends who are passing away, of course, but also people who are on top now. Like I think about Lizzo, and Dave's interview with her was really, really good. Her first network appearance was on Late Show, and it's cool to have to let these things kind of time move forward a little bit. And the folks who, at the end of Late Show or who started their careers are now in bloom. The Weeknd is another example. I'd love to see Dave talk to The Weeknd. He had a performance on Dave's show before the end. Vinny, I didn't give you a proper intro here because we just started going.
My next guest needs no introduction.
That's right.
Actually needs many. Not only do I need an introduction, I need an explanation and sometimes a spirited defense.
Well, you'll need no defense here. I'm excited about this. I'm excited to have our first network guy on here, and they're going to be the first of many. We're talking to some other folks who are technically considered the network guy. Vinnie Favale is how long were you associated with The Late Show?
Well, not counting my infamous stand-up appearance in 1982, his first year, officially, like on payroll, was June of 96 is when I began, right till the very end. I left Comedy Central to become the head of late night East Coast for CBS. And I was actually hired by Dave, Rob Burnett, and Mitch Semmel, who was the New York-based executive who was overseeing, if you remember, Bill Cosby had just come to CBS. So suddenly CBS was in business in New York. They had a primetime sitcom coming out of Astoria, I believe, and the late night show, because he had just come to CBS.
Okay, so and I want to give you so everybody, this is a real get for us, having Vinnie on the show, and he's again
no, not
just
no
like
no.
all,
This
just
is
like
Vinnie
all,
nodding his head no. If you're listening, Vinnie's shaking his head no. Go ahead.
Thank
You know,
you.
COVID's also a get. Doesn't mean it's a good thing.
You guys are all, it blows me away how everybody in the Pants family or associated with the Pants family, how self-deprecating you all are, and how hard it is to give you guys a goddamn compliment. It is really, really tough to do that. You have had such a unique viewpoint in the history of broadcasting. Credited as a founder of Comedy Central, a major player in the Late Show with David Letterman phase of Dave and Company's heritage and career.
More of a spectator. Sometimes I pitched some relief innings, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And then also deeply associated with Howard Stern. So I mean, my God, the breadth of experience that you have had in broadcasting and the things that you have seen. You're talking Comedy Central, which started from a certain place and now is at a very different place. When you talk about Stern, when you talk about Letterman, two titans of broadcasting. My God. And not just that, you love this shit. Like, you love this stuff.
I'm like one of those. There are many times where I'm like, I don't want to know how the steak is made. And unfortunately, I witnessed it. Sometimes I was one of the ingredients of the actual steak. But I was always a fan first, to the detriment of my career sometimes, and remained a fan, an even bigger fan. There were some times, maybe I want to say in the double digits, maybe between 10 and 20 days, where I started my day off at 6 a.m. sitting in with Howard, which was amazing. That's a whole separate podcast series, right? And then that afternoon being with Dave in rehearsal, because I was in a comedy piece that day. And I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. And I felt so fortunate. I still do feel that. I still think about that going, boy, that was definitely a great time. That was wonderful.
I've got so many places that I could go with you. And I mean, you're one of those guys who Giller gives me hell for saying this all the time, especially when the record button is on, because what are you going to say when I say, oh, I can't wait, I hope you come back at some point? He says, you say that to somebody and you give them no choice but to say they'll come back at some point. You're a guy who I want to have on here multiple times. I feel like I know you a little bit because of this here. I'm a huge fan of this book. I love Carter's books, don't get me wrong. Carter's books are incredible, but in my opinion, the greatest 6 weeks of television for me, my generation, hit me right between the eyes. No offense to Johnny's farewell on the Tonight Show, but for me, the greatest 6 weeks of television history, broadcast history, is the last 6 weeks of the Late Show.
It's incredible.
It was incredible. And you were the guy, you were the liaison between the network and the show. Is essentially, if I were to sum up what you were doing, that's really what it was. You were on the payroll of CBS, but you were a Pants, working for Worldwide Pants, and you were the guy that built the bridge between the two, right?
Yeah. I mean, there were days where I felt like, in the beginning of my career, I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I was like, because I was such a fan, and I didn't know Leslie. You know, Mitch had hired me, great guy. He was a very close friend, still one of my best friends. And if you remember, Leslie Moonves had just come to CBS, so he wasn't really, like, I didn't know him that well, and he was my boss's boss, right? And he had other priorities at the time, things to deal with, like turning CBS, because CBS was still the Murder, She Wrote network. when you got there, you know.
Yes.
And just to put in perspective, to talk about like Dave for a second,
Yes.
because I really like making this point of how unfair it was to Dave, what happened to him in the early years of CBS, pre-Leslie, pre-me.
We're talking NFL and all this stuff. Are
Yeah,
you okay? Good. This is great.
Like,
this is
well,
great.
not only that, just on a personal level, like he's being wooed by. Just remind me, it was Tish. Who was that? Who was the head of
Larry Tish. Larry
so
Tish.
She got Larry Tish.
Plus, Michael Ovitz was involved repping Dave.
Who was,
you know,
who was Larry Tish? And then who was the late night guy before me? In the Bill Carter book, it was Tish and the other guy. The head of programming were wooing Dave.
Yeah,
they were like, you know, you got to come here. We're gonna buy you a theater, you know, which they did. We're gonna buy you a theater. We're gonna renovate it. We're going to
ownership, the Carson deal. Dave walked in the way we talk about it here. He walked into the Carson deal.
Basically
he got 11:30, 12:30. It's all yours. Production. It's
not
all
only
yours.
that,
Here it is.
Not only that, we got football.
Yep.
We've got you know, they probably just didn't talk about primetime. You know, that was the thing. That they left off. But so Dave comes over, and then like within a couple of years, they're all gone.
Yep.
Tish sells the network to Westinghouse, not Group W, right? Yeah. So Dave went working for refrigerators to washing machines, you know, from GE to Westinghouse. So, and then those people leave, and then the worst, you know, football. They promised him football promos and football games. It was so bad. When I walked in there in 96, I didn't realize that things were so bad that when CBS lost their Detroit affiliate, right?
Yep.
They had to scramble and buy a UHF channel, a religious channel, like 70 something, that didn't even have an 11 o'clock news. So in Detroit, and I remember it always being like, I didn't understand what was going on because I had just started. And I remember Randy Grossack, awesome. She was the TD, not the TD, the AD, working with Jerry Foley, the director. And I remember saying, you know, them talking like, because I'm in the control room, just trying to take this all in and figure out all the players, who these people are. And people are looking at me like, what the hell is this guy? Thank God I had Shecky. Like Shecky was like my rabbi. Shecky was right there by my side, you know. And I think there was a sense of, if Shecky trusts him, we'll trust him a little, you know, that kind of thing. But
he's got a great radar, though. Shecky's got a great radar for people. Absolutely.
He really does.
Yeah.
And I remember it was so bad that because the show would often be over in time and you know, had to be delivered by 11:30. But except for Detroit, they had to do it a half hour earlier, which was a huge difference. So I think there were some times where Detroit might have gotten a slightly different version of the show because they had to jam that edit in.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. I think, you know, Shecky and Randy and Jerry Foley could probably shed better light on that. But I do remember that was a big deal. So anyway, long story, even longer. That's what I walked into. So when I came there in 96, John Pike, the late night executive, had been fired and they never replaced him. I mean, that's how bad things were. There was like, you know, and I think to a certain extent, everyone backed off because they said that that's what Dave wanted anyway. You know, Dave didn't want the people that wooed him to come to CBS to be there every night. You know, it's like, okay, we'll take it from here. Leave us alone. You know, I remember famously, only because Shecky tells me this, I wasn't there, but when the show launched, I think they did a special feed in what the restaurant, which used to be McSorley's, you know, it was Sullivan's bar for 2 minutes, right? In the Ed Sullivan Theater, right downstairs. It used to be, at the time, it was just an Irish pub, but they fed a feed in there, and that's where the CBS executives were. Like they weren't even allowed in the theater. So that's
the place that has a secret entrance into the theater, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Where Jackie Gleason famously used to go there.
And I think they brought Leno in. I think they put Leno in there too when they did the Doritos commercial. When they did the Super Bowl, when they did the Super Bowl commercial. I think they.
Hey, I want you to know that I had that was so top secret, so awesome. But I remember when it was delivered to me, when it was, we were digital at this point. So I remember they handed me a thumb drive, I think it was, or a hard drive with the high resolution version of it. And it's going to be in the Super Bowl commercial. And I'm like, oh my God, I have this. It was the early days of Twitter. I'm like, I could blow up my career right now by just uploading this. But I remember like that was Awesome. So already I'm all over the timeline, but
No,
anyway,
please do. No, please do. Please
just
do.
to
This is
paint the
good.
picture in Dave's defense for all of his crankiness and frustrations with CBS and even with me personally in the early years, it was because it's like, well, Jesus Christ, you sold me a car, but there's no extended warranty. There's like now it's all falling apart.
Yep.
And I'm stuck here with Murder, She Wrote and Diagnosis Murder and Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman. Like there were all of these shows. It was almost like the Pat Robertson channel, like the Christian Broadcast Network, that kind of stuff. So, and I don't think Dave was patient with Leslie in the beginning because, it takes years to turn this stuff around. And thankfully, Leslie did it relatively quickly with Survivor and CSI and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, and I think everybody loves Raymond helped. I think that
in the beginning, Raymond absolutely. I think Leslie was in some ways a bigger supporter or as much of Raymond as Letterman was. I mean, he really, really nurtured that show. But I remember Worldwide Pants freaking out when it was being moved when Leslie moved it from Friday to Monday. I mean, freaking out. I'm sure they were excited, but also like, oh my God, now, because Monday was a big night for CBS. It was Murphy Brown. It was Designing Woman.
That was their for lack of a better term. I'm sorry for the cross branding here. If CBS had a must see TV night, Monday night was
that was it
at that time.
Absolutely rock solid. And that was all Leslie. Leslie was like, I'm doing this, and I think there was. Really? You sure? Because then now that's a true test. When you're Friday, you can kind of go along and you can be critically acclaimed and your ratings don't matter that much.
But you're up against ABC's TGIF as well.
Not only that, you don't have any lead in or anything like that. Now, I think we gave him, I want to say Murphy Brown was the lead in. So it's like, well, now we're going to know, So kudos to Leslie on that for helping build that. But that was a pretty incredible, time period to come into that. So I just wanted to kind of paint that picture of and I want
to paint another line on there. I got it because you're a fan, right? You're a giant fan. Okay, so you come in and you obviously, as a big fan, you have seen how Letterman has treated Warren Littlefield and some of these other, the pinheads, the weasels, all these things. Like when you took the job, was there a part of you going, I'm about to be labeled a pinhead? Like, was there a part of you going, I'm about to be that guy in this show potentially? Or were you like, I'm going to come in here and not be that guy? Did that enter your mind at all?
I'm trying to remember. I do remember. Like, I didn't know what I was supposed to be. Like, I thought I should be wearing a suit, for instance, and I show up on my first day, the production meeting, and Rob Burnett, who's awesome, pulls me aside. He was the showrunner for many of the years. He's like, if you ever wear a suit again, you're out of here. Don't do that, which was great. And so then I probably leaned into more. It took... Maybe for them, it seemed apparent earlier. For me, it took a while, I thought, leaning into more of my natural personality, which was more irreverent. But I was always like conscious of like, wait, these are the funny people. I'm the funny guy in the office, but I'm not the funny guy. These people are paid for that. They do that. But like I said earlier, it took me several years to figure out that whatever problems were happening, and there were many, were my problems. They weren't Leslie's problems to figure out. They weren't Mitch's problems to figure out. They were for me. I can't run to because at a certain point, Mitch left, and then it was just me dealing directly with Leslie. And I remember thinking, okay, you know what? If Leslie doesn't hear from me in a week, that's a good week for Leslie, because whatever I'm talking to him, it's got to be really serious, something where I just need his advice on, or I just need to give him a heads up, but I have to figure it out. Like, I learned over time that it wasn't, what should we do, Leslie, about whatever the problem is. It became more of, okay, here's what's going on, and this is what I'm inclined, I think we should do. I just want you to know, so that if he disagreed, he could tell me, right? But I kind of gave him the problem and the answer to the problem already,
Yeah,
kind of
you're
wrapped in.
basically saying this is how this is
Yeah,
what's
so that's
going
the
on.
kind of stuff that and it was everything from not enough promotion time. I remember there was one time, oh, this was I was thinking about this the other day. I thought I was losing my mind. Uh, so to remind everyone, the 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 downfall in ratings for because Letterman was on top of the world ratings wise when he came to CBS. He
Absolutely.
didn't make a difference
He way
what the
over
lead-ins were.
delivered what they thought. Like nobody ever thought, because
Right.
on paper, when you look at the map as to what is possible, is it possible he could get higher ratings than the Tonight Show? It's technically possible, but there were many cards when it came to affiliates, when it came to the demo and how things were spread around. There were many cards that were already stacked against him to be able to do that. Like the fact that he was able to, for a year and a half, be on top was improbable from the very beginning.
They weren't selling it that way. I mean, I'm sure they were selling it for an optimistic rating, but not like that. And so so at that point, they're going, wait till next season. Now we could adjust it and sell it at the higher rate.
Yes.
And then what happens is the ascension of must-see TV.
Yes.
That was a big deal. The combination of losing football and losing all that valuable promotion time. What good is it saying you have Julia Roberts on Monday if nobody can hear it? You need to tell the people what you're doing.
Yes.
And then, so Jay Leto's going up and Dave's numbers were going down. So that was kind of like the world that we were living in. I remember it started to become then you got the Oscars, so if you were going to just do the timeline, and these things are they're exaggerations, because if you look at that Oscar
it
ratings,
was fantastic, by the way. That Oscar performance was
one of the
awesome.
highest Oscar ratings ever. Number one.
Yep.
And by and large, it was very, very funny, and he brought a lot of his show to that, like Stupid Petricks, but people do that. The hosts
before you continue, I'm just going to say, I still to this day quote a joke from that Oscars, and it's not my own joke, it's Dave's joke, but Tarantino and Bender come up to get their only Oscar, and Bender's like, yeah, I think this is the only one we're gonna get tonight, so I'm gonna thank this and this and this and this and this, because it was the Forrest Gump year, I think, is what it was. And so they leave. And he said, before he leaves, he goes, and plus, okay, I think this is our only time up here, and I really have to take a pee, so I'm going to go now. And Letterman goes up there and goes, I've had to take a leak for 4 hours now. I don't know what his problem is. And I say that all the time.
So great.
To this day. So great. And that's one of Letterman's quips from that show. You guys are crazy to me how you guys undersell everything that you do, and it all comes from the top, and that culture.
Well, it comes from Dave and people like Rob Burnett. I mean, Rob Burnett will tell you, if you ever talk to him, that would be a great thing. Rob
we're working on it.
Dave's MacGyver, help him figure out things. But Rob explains the whole Oprah thing.
Yep.
As it was a longer joke. These things come in threes.
Yeah, he takes the blame on that joke. He says that's my fault.
But it really even wasn't his fault, because they were supposed to take Keanu, so there was a third word in there. It was Oprah, Keanu, Kiana, Oprah, Uma. You know the rhythm of comedy, right?
Yes.
That never happened, because I think it was a missed shot. Rob could tell the story better. But anyway, that's another thing, an exaggeration of this combination of, ratings are down.
Yep.
Oscars was supposedly a disaster. And then the Morty, the producer, was let go.
Yeah.
And now sharks are smelling blood.
Hal retired.
What's that?
Hal Gurney retired too.
Yeah, Hal Gurney retired, right?
Yep.
And so but from a press point of view, so anyway, this is what leads to, so I get there just at that. What happened was, and I owe my job there to Rob Burnett and Mitch Semmel for putting me up for it, and Rob for really making the case for me with Dave, which was incredible. But I remember being there. It was less than a year, and there was, I forget what the sitcom was, but one character was trying to console another character in a sitcom. And in doing so, she said, like, like if you were my buddy David Letterman, I would be saying, Dave, don't worry about the low ratings. And I was like attacking from within, like that was like such a sore subject in general. But for his own network to use it as a punchline, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, right?
Yeah.
This was me trying to get ahead of it, right?
Yeah.
So they went, understandably, the show was really upset. Rob was upset, Dave was upset, everybody was upset.
Yep.
And I had to get to the bottom of it. Like they wanted an answer. They wanted, how does this happen, right?
Yep.
And I think it was like, again, it was Leslie had just got there. Leslie's trying to put out all these other fires. And, it takes a while to instill in everyone like this team spirit, because the West Coast is the West Coast. And then, they're dealing with different producers who don't work for CBS, who don't give a shit about Letterman. They're just producing sitcoms and scripts and trying to figure things out, right?
Yep.
And I remember needing a tape of it. I remember bringing it up, saying, okay, this is going to be a problem, right?
Yes.
And I had Mitch by my side, which was awesome. And I remember at the time, I forget what her name was, the head of the current department. She was upset. I think even upset with me for making a big deal about it, but it was a big deal. And she pulls a tape and she says, you've lost your mind because it never happened. And she shows me the scene and it doesn't mention Dave at all. It's like, am I going crazy? And I remember it was one that I saw the show hadn't seen. So I was the one that brought it to their attention. Remember?
Okay.
I want to get ahead of it. You don't want to,
absolutely.
You want to give the bad news. You don't want to like be yelled at for someone else finding it before you could tell them. And I'm like, okay, I'm losing my mind. Turns out there were two versions of it. The producers, which is not unusual. They
of
shoot,
course. Yeah. They got one version.
See what works, what doesn't. And they went with that one. So, that led to like a top to bottom review. We don't dump on our own people. We don't, we shouldn't even have to, there shouldn't even have to be a rule, but it was like, every producer on the lot needs to know if you're delivering the show for CBS, we're not going to be the punchline.
Well, and exactly the opposite was happening up till that point when all the momentum was rolling like crazy. Dave goes out to California and you guys are popping up on other franchises. You're like, here's a scene on Friends where they
how amazing was that?
CBS,
and it's really great that CBS was okay with all that. Like, again, you got to let him do it, but he's doing it in a controlled, funny manner, as opposed to it. But that just illustrates how mainstream of a news story was that Dave's ratings are low, that now a sitcom that no one's watching can make a reference to it, because they know, no one's saying, what does it mean consoling Dave about ratings? I don't get that joke. Like everyone got that joke because his ratings were low. So so that was the environment that I was there.
You know what? Absolutely. And I've talked about it on this show with 4 or 5 different people along the way. The thing that blows me away, and I mean, I can't wait to have Bill Carter on here and talk to him about this too. Cause I mean, I don't know if there's a more educated mind on this subject, on all of the entire late night world of everything out there. The thing that blows me away, and I love that I'm able to talk to you about this because you are entrenched just as deeply. You were part of it. The fact is, The Tonight Show was a juggernaut, like a juggernaut. No network ever could put up something that would withstand The Tonight Show, ever. And they all tried for decades. To me, the story is, okay, there's the CBS versus NBC landscapes and all the things that you and I are talking about right now, which is true. We're talking about the idea that Letterman could be ahead of The Tonight Show for an extended period of time where the cards were stacked against. The fact of the matter is, no franchise had ever even competed with The Tonight Show. And the fact that CBS, okay, if it turned out that there was 1 million viewers over there versus over here or whatever, the fact of the matter is, just 10 years prior, an extra 1 million viewers, hey, we don't care. We're still doing backflips in the street because we actually have a franchise that could take on The Tonight Show. And to me, I'm so glad Dave didn't get The Tonight Show, because he would have had to be the standard bearer of the franchise that he loves so much, having been handed the mantle from his absolute,
Right.
the maestro that he followed in the business, Johnny Carson, and he would have had to be the guy that dealt with the dilution of 3 networks to 4 networks to more so to cable and satellite and all of the dilution that happened. And he would have had to watch because the landscape was changing anyway, which would make it harder to have that kind of a stranglehold. Instead, he went over and he created something and built a franchise. And by the way, here you go, CBS, look at what he gave them. He gave them a franchise now that once he handed the reins back to them, now they have they're an absolute player, and right now the dominant player in late night. To me, that's all because of David Letterman's insane ability to draw people in and to connect with people, and the fact that he is a broadcaster, not just a comedian, and all of that stuff. The fact that he could even compete with the Tonight Show is insane.
Yeah, and it's so I agree that I agree with you that I think it was better that he did come to CBS, even though he had to go through a lot, because when you think about it, the Tonight Show was a natural progression from Studio 6B where he was at, like now
Yep.
we're in a place where we all know, but it's very hard to make that your own because of the history with Johnny Carson and those
Yep.
curtains. Like, what would he have done set wise? I love that he went from this practically college radio show of a TV show, right?
Yes.
To an exaggerated, like the Tonight Show was almost more of an official coronation than the Ed Sullivan Theater, which to me felt like an over the top exaggeration.
Yes.
It's like I'm going from college radio to the number 1 station and for the perceived number 1 thing.
Yep.
And the fact that the ratings matched it was a coincidence and amazing and great. And maybe it should have been a slow build, but I liked the over the topness that the Ed Sullivan Theater gave him.
Absolutely. And I mean, over the years, I'm pretty sure it was Conan's last appearance where he said this, but there was a point where a guest said to him, I'm almost positive it was Conan, saying, okay, well, yeah, and you've got this theater here. And Dave just right naturally just said, I love this theater. And he proclaimed that out, and the audience laughs and saw that place had an energy to it. It had a real, I only entered in stores twice as somebody who got a chance. It was honored to watch the show happen live, but both times it's like, you talk about, for a sports analogy, it's like the biggest home ice or home field advantage that you could ever have is that building. That building is unbelievable.
Oh, it's so
magic.
exciting. You think about the Beatles and Elvis Presley, and what's great now, there's talk about YouTube channels. We're talking about the Letterman channel, but there's the Ed Sullivan channel now. Andrew Salt, who's a friend of mine, bought the library of the Ed Sullivan Show, and he's been uploading videos, not just music but comedy performances. And I love on the Ed Sullivan Show, there's a performance by, I want to say, Jack Jones, the guy who sang the Love Boat theme, where I forget what the song he does, but he goes into the audience. There's a lot of ones where they go into the audience, and you see it, you go, oh, it hasn't changed. I mean, that's the same theater. And physically, it's exactly the same structure as Dave. So that was exciting, always being there. Remember the early CBS shows before I worked there, when he did the Ghost of Ed Sullivan would appear, and they'd have
very first episode in there. He did. I loved that. I love that so much. I'm a guy who, again, I'm Western Canada, so to me, I'm so removed from the situation. I don't understand how there isn't a movement to rename that theater the Ed Sullivan David Letterman Theater. I think it's so historic, and you have these two titans of broadcasting, and the fact that Dave paid reverence to that by having people who performed on that stage over, referencing it all the time. Ringo Starr sitting there with Dave, Paul playing on the marquee, the Ghost of Ed Sullivan, like you said. I love the fact that they embraced that.
No, I love it. I think it might have come up at one point and Dave turned it down. I like that it's the Ed Sullivan Theater, because I associate the Ed Sullivan Theater with David Letterman.
Isn't that funny?
I do.
Yeah.
And I think that since you're all about trying to keep the flag going, let's give Ed a break. Let's leave it Ed Sullivan, because look what people should be Googling. Who the hell is this Ed Sullivan guy? Because David,
that's a good
talk
point.
about a rabbit hole. I'm telling you, the Andrew Salt website for the Ed Sullivan Show is amazing. I mean, it's absolutely incredible with all of the archives.
That's really cool. And it'd be, again, in a perfect world, I don't know. The nice thing again about the pants thing, and we're talking like me and a few other people who want to be part of this, the idea that it's amazing that pants is independent. You know, they can make a deal with NBC for the old footage and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, it's not a network driven thing. That Pants can kind of be an independent thing on its own. It'd be really cool to see Walter work with who is it that started the Ed Sullivan channel? Who did you say it was?
Andrew Salt.
Okay, so Andrew, it'd be cool if Andrew and Walter could work together and, you know, okay, here's the Beatles' first performance, and here's now every after effect, trickle down from that, where Paul or Ringo or whatever appeared on
the good news is, here's the good news though. The fans could do that because you could put a playlist together very easily. You just put them all there. You could do it.
I could
Stop
do it.
talking about it.
Oh,
do it.
man. All
just
right.
do 6 Degrees of Ed Sullivan. I'm talking about the Beatles. Here's a proud moment. This is one thing that I did that I'm very excited about. I could say this legitimately and back it up. I booked the Beatles on the Late Show with David Letterman. The actual Beatles, John, Paul, George, and Ringo. And here's how I did it. It was probably was 2004. So I want to say I'm horrible with math. The 30th anniversary of the Beatles being on the Ed Sullivan Show, right?
Okay.
The 40th. 2004 would have been the 40th.
Yep.
And I remember thinking, oh God, that's such a big thing. And other than talk about it, what could we do? You know, we have nothing. Letterman really has nothing to do with the Beatles except for seeing them on TV like everyone else at the time. But I had an idea, and I knew Andrew Salt was going to release a DVD of that show. So I called up. I said, hey, and I didn't even know if the show would be interested, but I wanted to tee it up so that I could back it up.
Yeah.
And I said to Andrew, hey, Andrew, would you ever consider if Letterman holds up your DVD to just plug like, hey, we got this, you know, would you give us for free the rights for the Beatles for that? Because he owns the video rights to play that video on during the show that night. And he goes, absolutely. So I pitched it to Rob, and Dave agreed. And it was great. So you can go back. I'm sure it's somewhere in the archive, you know, that Leonard goes, you know, 40 goes tonight on this very stage, the Beatles, ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles. And then, you know, we just ran the video, but it was cool. I think we pulled the screen down. I think Jerry put a screen down so people in the theater could see it, not just on the monitors, but at the moment. So
Walter, Dawn, we know you're watching at some point. Either way, guys, if at some point we can make that work, if it's not out there, if we can make it out, get it out there, let's do it.
So was Don Giller still doing his Letterman stuff, right? That hasn't stopped him.
Well, I don't want to tell any tales out of school. What I will say is that it's very cool to see that Don Giller has the right to wear the pants. Hey, I got a couple pants jackets myself, but I've been unofficially welcomed into the family. It's nice to see that he's been welcomed into the family. As for the minutia of what it is that they do in the background, I don't want to say anything out here. But
no. Sit here. Yeah, I think
but the fact that he does work for pants is a cool thing. And I certainly hope moving forward that there can be a mechanism where, you know, Walter, Don, and I would love to insert myself in there as well, where we can take moments like this and insert them into the podcast or whatever. That would be amazing. But as a fact checker for us and as a supporter of what we're doing here, Don, we appreciate you so much, man.
Great. Don is amazing. I remember
he's amazing.
Long before I met him,
and
again, I met him through Shecky. There was a great Village Voice. I don't know if you know the Village Voice. There was a big New York newspaper, counterculture. And I remember they doing a big piece on this Don Giller guy who had every episode on videotape. And I'm like, oh my God, how cool is that? Because, you know, Dave really, that's amazing. I think for people like Don and me and you and Shecky, if he wasn't working for Dave, but it's kind of that way. The Dave was like the Grateful Dead, and we were Deadheads, you know, collecting the tapes.
That's
you know, every show was a jewel, you know. And I made this case in an interview years ago before I left, before Dave went off the air, basically saying that, and I think it's true, that Letterman invented YouTube. in that when you think about like a Letterman show, is almost like a rabbit hole of YouTube. Oh, there's a pet trick, there's a music performance, there's a silly viral piece of comedy. Like think about it,
Yeah.
And because they were always stuck together because it was a 45-minute show that aired once and whatever,
Yep.
it took nerds like us pre-YouTube to maybe extract. I used to do that with SCTV. That was the other big thing at the
Oh,
time.
you're making a Canadian very proud right now saying that.
SCTV mixtapes, if you will,
Yep.
where I had like a beta. I'd record SCTV and Letterman on beta because that was a higher quality.
Yeah.
And then, but it was only an hour, right?
Yep.
And it eventually bumped to 90 minutes, but it was only an hour. And I remember, and it was very difficult picking the best, but okay, this highlight moment, I got to put on this compilation tape. And think about it, that's YouTube,
Yep,
and
absolutely.
now because it's all a la carte, it truly is. And that's why it's such a kick seeing him on YouTube in all of these, separate elements.
Yeah, and the thing that I love about it too is Walter and them they're doing it right. Because they're because Letterman broke the fourth wall. Like, the whole reason I feel like I can do this show is because I was invited into the show. I was invited into the show over viewer mail. I was invited into the show because the cast and the crew, the cast of the show was the crew.
Right. I think people don't realize, many of the fans, that Biff wasn't an actor. Like, he was the stage manager. And there were times where there might have been frustrations. And poor Biff, like, okay, it's tough to get Julia Roberts out of her dressing room when I just was on stage doing a comedy piece, It's like, and poor Jerry has to navigate how to balance one of his top tech guys on the show is actually on the show.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I had Jerry on the show. It hasn't come out yet, but at the time that this one is released, Jerry Mulligan's show will be released. And I mean, how many appearances did he have? With Chris Elliott, or wearing a crazy costume, or doing all these things while he was a writer. It got so much easier. He said when he retired in 04, and then it's okay. Yeah, but we're going to use Jerry for a piece tonight, and then just a town car would arrive, take him to the show, and it was. But can you imagine the breakneck speed? He talked about how sometimes a top 10 list, Dave's holding the audience because they didn't like the top 10 list, and threw it to the writers, come up with a new top 10 list on the fly because they're holding the audience. Like, can you imagine? And then being a cast member of the show at the same time.
Well, this was so great. I think it was, I hate to say it was my best appearance, but truly it was. Maybe I did about a dozen.
Yeah.
And this was the funniest thing, and not because of me, because it was the way the bit was conceived.
Sure.
That I've ever done the show. Even funnier than when I did 14 minutes on the show doing stand-up and paddle. Like, this thing, I remember getting a call from, I think it was Jude Brennan, who's one of the top producers there. Awesome.
She's on our hit list right there. She's absolutely on our hit list. Yeah.
She's great. Just an amazing person. She called, I would purposely walk into the control room as late as possible, just before, like, maybe even when the credits were rolling, opening credits. I didn't want, it's a very tight space, didn't want to be in the way, didn't want them to feel the network's here in case they had to air any dirty laundry, like whatever problems. I mean, we trusted each other at this point after all those years, but still, I was like, that was, just go in and get out. I didn't linger, right? So I got a call from about 4:30, Jude saying, when are you coming over? I'm like, oh, we'll be over like the usual. She goes, could you come over now? I'm like, oh God, what's going on? She goes, no, it's fine. There's just a thing that we might want you to do for the show. So I go in there, and I think I had done some other stuff, little things, but Jerry Foley, the director, who's just another great person, and someone mentor, someone who really helped me navigate the treacherous waters of late night TV.
He also took the baton from Hal fucking Gurney. Like, holy cow, and kept it
amazingly. No, made it his own. It's his own baton.
Yeah. There you go. Yes.
So he said, look, there's a comedy piece they want you to do, right? And I'm looking at the script, and it's funny, and I'm going, well, why me? Like, why isn't there an actor doing this? So what happened was, I think it was the Stengel brothers. I don't know if they wrote it, but it got into that pattern, almost like the old Dean Martin show. Whenever there was a piece, I don't know if you remember, Dean Martin was infamous for not going to all the rehearsals, on the Dean Martin show on NBC, and they would tape everything so he could see. So someone would be standing in. It was actually more of an extreme. If Dave was in the piece, Dave would be at rehearsal. But if a lot of comedy pieces that Dave threw to, it just involved the company of actors, the pre-tapes, right?
Sure.
So in this bit, it was a network executive making an announcement. It was at the height of Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. There were a couple of things going on where suddenly it just like everything was gay, right? Like, and CBS is getting in on the action, but becoming, the really gay network. I don't know if you can even do that piece now, but that was the conceit of the joke. And to explain it, here's Vinnie Favale, right?
Yeah.
And the writers just thought it was a goof inside joke, like we was talking earlier, just, make him be Vinnie Favale because that's our guy, right?
Yeah.
But they hired an actor. So an actor did it and they pre-taped it and they played it for Dave just before the show, right? Like around maybe 4:00.
Yeah.
Saying, here's the piece. This is how it works. And Dave's only comment was, well, why aren't we using Vinnie? And the writers, I'm sure, were like, because he's not a comedian, he's not an actor, he's not funny. There's a million reasons why we shouldn't use him. He goes, no, we should use Vinnie for this. And I think it wasn't because Dave, I'm sure it wasn't because Dave thought Vinnie could hit this one out of the park. Vinnie's going to be great. It's almost like, let's make that little weasel squirm, because you are being CBS. And when you think about it, like that isn't even something I gave a heads up to Leslie about, which is insane, and I should have, right? Because I'm actually speaking for CBS.
Sure,
it's on YouTube. It's on my channel. I encourage you to
Okay,
look
so
at
where
it.
is your channel? Like, do you
Vinnie Favale on YouTube? I'm sure you can find.
Okay,
it there. There's a whole Letterman playlist of things that I've done over the years.
We'll promote that as well as an accompaniment to this episode on our channels, and we'll get that out there as well. That's awesome.
So just for edification, you can see. So I come out.
And entertainment, sir. You guys are all just
it's so funny. It's so well written. It's so freaking great that the crowd, like, they ate it up. And you could tell I'm stilted, which I think is what made it really, really funny.
Yeah.
Funnier. Like there's an awkwardness to me that's just coming from the fact that, like, okay, let's just take a beat here. And Jerry was great. Jerry took me through the whole thing, like, slow down. They had the cue cards, so wait for the laugh. So I did it, but I also, it looked like I really was the executive, which I guess I was.
Yeah, you technically were.
So it all worked. It was a home run. TV Guide, which now you're talking to a guy, I'm embarrassed to say, very much like Frank Costanza, has a collection of TV guides. Okay.
People don't understand. You're the only reason that you're embarrassed is that people don't make the connection as to how important that little magazine was for so long.
Seinfeld ruined it though for nerds like us, where Elaine goes, he collects these? Ultimate vindication for my wife. See, I told you, you loser. What are you doing? So anyway, TV Guide calls and says, we need the name of the two actors that are in that piece because we want to do a cheer. Remember Cheers and Jeers?
Absolutely.
TV Guide, right?
Absolutely.
And the publicist said, well, one was an actor, the guy who did it with me, Doug, I think was his name, and the other was Vinnie Favale. He's the CBS executive. And they were like, oh, so the week later, with my picture in TV Guide, shows up in the Cheer and Jeer. So like, but that gets into the whole kind of meta of it all.
Yes.
About like the thing about Dave that I think is so brilliant. He was able to have his cake and eat it too, where he was doing a talk show. He was doing an amazing job of a talk show. And I'm talking like in the beginning on NBC, it was almost more of a parody of a talk show, right?
Totally.
Like he's doing it, but he tried to maintain that comedic integrity at CBS, which is harder when everything is elevated. Now
especially when it's the big show, when it's the show business,
and everything is big.
Yep.
But I remember him doing things like, at the desk. Okay, here's how this works. We're doing Mother's Day cards. Paul, Mother's Day cards. Like not a lot went into the coming up with the jingle for that, but it was great, right?
Yes.
And the audience applause. Whatever. So here's how it works. Here, I've got a card in my hand. A card in my hand. I am going to read you the headline of the card,
Yep.
And then I will make a humorous comment. You know, so he's explaining the bit beat by beat, almost like apologizing in advance because this might not be funny. By calling it, by labeling it, I will be reading the humorous comment. So that's the great thing about like the fact that they used me for the piece, because he thought in his mind the writers aren't thinking let's use Vinnie. Rightfully so, because they wrote a piece that was very, very funny. That might have even been funnier in the hands of a smooth talking actor playing the network executive. Coming from me, I look like the awkward accountant at the network, you know, reading it. But Dave's instincts were right because it was funny. You know, the awkwardness was funny.
There's a couple things that the one thing you use the word meta, and it's so funny. It's ironic, Vinnie, that you use that word right now, because again, that my 25-year-old son with his wife and all that, they meta, they understand that word. Guys like us, we don't understand that word, but Dave was meta before meta became a thing.
Oh my god, absolutely.
And there's a generation gap there, because our generation
whole show was a mirror. That was absolutely it should be David Letterman.
Yeah, it was, and that's one of the secret sauces that changed it. Like, it made it a Gen X show. Plus the fact again that it's a broadcaster. Like, I'm a broken fucking record saying this. David Letterman is my Walter Cronkite. He flat out is. Like, I look at my dad.
I mean, literally with the 9/11.
And we've talked about that on the show too. Like, okay, so I want to ask you about that. There's so much. I've got so much I want to ask you. I know that you'll come back and we'll be able to do this and do this more. Like this is magic to me. And I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you opening up so much about this. Yeah, the 9/11 show. I mean, we've talked about this. I used to call it a tragedy. Don Giller gave me a better word for it. It's an atrocity. It was an atrocity. The idea that Dave literally was the guy that told not just the nation, I'm a guy from Western Canada. I didn't laugh again until Dave said it was okay to laugh again. I don't know if you've watched that show in its entirety, but the interview with Dan Rather it's when I watch it every year. That's how I mark the 9/11 occasion, as I watch the entire show, and I've got it on my hard drive. I watch it, from beginning to end. Everyone talks about Dave's speech, which was nothing short of transcendent.
I want to remind people before you go on,
please.
Like all the other shows, we were dark the week of 9/11.
Yes.
So just to set the table, and then I'll throw it right back to you.
Yeah.
We were dark. The Tonight Show was dark. And there was some question of, should we even come back the Monday, like because the other shows they weren't sure yet, right? Everyone was kind of looking to see what Dave was going to do.
Yeah.
And then ultimately Dave made the decision to come back, having no idea what show he was going to do, the kind of show he was going to do, and decided on Dan Rather and Regis Philbin. And let me do the Regis part after you do the Dan part. Go ahead, continue. Back to you. Your show now.
Well, no, and I would love any insights that you have from the network level. Like was Dave the one who was making all the decisions, and you guys were behind your guy? I think
Dave needed to hear from, because don't forget, we like all the networks were doing wall-to-wall coverage. Like we were actually broadcasting, the news nonstop, right? And I believe the word came down. Dave, before he could even make a decision, needed to hear that there was a decision to be made. Like, is my slot, if I wanted to do the show, is there even a place for me to do it? And
were you involved with that decision, or were you told?
No, that was ultimately Leslie's decision.
Directly at the very, very fucking top.
Oh my God, top. Yeah. As far as, that would be, as it should be, because this was like a big deal. Because don't forget, it's almost like, they're getting back to regular television. I guess CBS has moved on. You know what I'm saying? You could really
you don't want to make a case for that.
I think we were one of the first to start going back to rolling out shows in prime time too. I think maybe that Monday, because it was wall to wall coverage. Everything was preempted, and at a certain point, we got to figure this out. What are we doing here? I think the word came down from Leslie, and then we passed it on to the show. If you want to do, we weren't going to force him to do a show,
right? It's open for you if you want it.
If you guys think you have it in you, we're ready to get back to business in late night. So I mean, and then it was up to Dave to decide, and then that was a big deal for all the other shows, because not only the fact that he was doing it, which was a big deal, means that they could do it, but let's see how he does it. What is his
Yeah.
version of it? And and if you
I have
remember, it was
goosebumps
a
right
cold
now.
open. It was just there
Yep.
was no loud
The
music. It was
flag, just the flag.
the shot of the theater,
And
and
yeah.
and Dave, I think at the desk, not even at the monologue, Dave at the
Yep.
desk.
Yep.
And then Dan Rather. But the thing that people, I want to remind people of that show, as powerful as all that is, the highlight for me, and the Can We Laugh Again credit goes as much, I think, to Regis Philbin as
Absolutely.
anyone else. Regis
Absolutely.
sat there, I mean, and hit it out of the park. It's
Yep.
like, at one point he goes, "I felt bad for Dan over there. Like, I want to give him a tissue." I forgot what the joke was, but he makes a comment that's almost goofing on Dan's heartfelt, teary-eyed
Yep.
response. And it cracked Dave up. And really, that, you got to give credit where credit is due. And I think Dave was brilliant by surrounding himself with the gravitas of Dan Rather, and the
Yes.
looseness and the irreverence that Regis. I remember around that time, I want to say around the time, maybe a little after, we started doing the Cape thing. Remember the Cape with Paul Schaefer? He would be singing that James
Oh
Brown like
yeah.
song. He was
Yeah.
doing it in the commercial breaks. And then a different celebrity would come out every week. It was once a week to do the Cape.
Yep.
And it went on for like a ridiculously amount of, I want to say over a year, maybe over a year we're doing this. And we're all like, oh my God, how long is this bit going to go on? Because it was really just for the audience. And it
By
was
the
like,
way,
little,
hey, Don and Walter, let's see some of that. Let's throw some
yeah,
of that
yeah,
out
yeah, a
there. Oh my
compilation.
God.
But
Anyway,
but I
keep
got
going. Yeah.
two points to make on that.
Please.
I
Please.
remember, I would try to drop a joke in the moments during the show. Everyone did, like very Mystery
Yeah.
Science Theater, like especially if a band is on and they're horrible, or just someone, it's a guest that, oh, Dave's not vibing with, whatever. And I remember towards the end of the Cape thing, Governor Pataki was the one who did the Cape. And I remember going, well, I guess we're finally over 9/11. Like this is
Yeah.
what it's done. But I got to tell you, here's a trivia. I was the penultimate person to do the Cape. I did it. You knew they were running at the bottom of the well when I was doing it, but I did it. And I think they realized, okay, if Vinny's doing it, we need to close this thing down. And the last one was, I believe, Paul Anka. I think you could check with Don Giller on that one.
Oh man, that's so cool.
But
I
but
love going
but
deep and talking
but the
about this
Cape
stuff.
thing was Paul Schaefer. Like, can we talk about Paul for a second?
Yeah.
What a co-pilot he was for
Yeah.
Dave, just comedically,
Perfect.
musically, and Dave's a big fan of music, and the song that Paul did, it was a tribute to James Brown, but it was actually, I think it was a Blood, Sweat, and Tears song from their first album. That was one of those, like, all these false endings, and he walks away and they do the Cape on him. But it was, I encourage people to look at compilation stuff if there is any.
Yeah. And
Maybe Don will pull it together.
Well, this is where Don's channel is so important because of the stuff that he was doing and the fact that they've figured out a way to keep it up. And the contrast to the new YouTube generation wants videos 6 minutes or less, or whatever that formula is, and all that, and they're perfect contrasts to each other, because you look at the deep dive that Don did when he would put things together, the way that he would show the evolutions of things.
Well, he once did a compilation of Albert Brooks appearances, like an Albert Brooks tweeted, he goes, "Oh wow, someone put this together." I'm sure Don was thrilled to notice that he got on Albert Brooks's radar,
right? And watching the evolution, not just of the person in the chair, watching all these appearances throughout the entire run, however long it was, but watching Dave's evolution, as an interviewer, the literal level of comfort. We're starting we're basically going to be starting a Letterman podcast network. Hopefully we're going to get some official word that we can do it officially, but it's happening either way. The other guy that I'm starting it with, he's a huge, again, I love the entire, I got to precurse this because I love the entire Letterman run, the entire evolution. I adore it. Some people gravitate to different places of Dave's career where they love it. He's the late night guy, the innovation, the basement, the deconstruction of the talk show, all of that stuff.
Right.
For me, again, for lack of a better term, the bottom of the pyramid is that time, but the top of the pyramid, where Dave is actually more powerful. Like, he's the most powerful man in show business as far as I'm concerned. I loved watching him do that. And the one that there's oh God, I can't believe how late we're getting. There's so many. Okay, good. Good. Because I want to ask you about Stern. I do want to ask you about that, but there's
whatever. Yeah.
There's a night that I want to ask you about, talking about powerful Dave. John McCain.
I got a story for that.
I bet you do. Because the network guy being able to throw out the red carpet. Oh my God, I love that. Please. The night John McCain tried to do his little do-si-do and it didn't work at all, and you guys capitalized.
That was one of those. It's in a nutshell what my job was and how I worked with the show. So let me paint the picture. We are, he was supposed to do the show, John McCain. It was a big get. He was a friend of the show.
Running for president, but it was on the show.
It was a big booking, right?
Yep.
And there was a big financial crisis going on at the time, and he used that as I won't say an excuse. It was like, okay, I got to get back to Washington because he was still senator. We got to vote on this thing. So
suspending his campaign.
No one questioned it. And the show went to their go-to guy, the modern day Tony Randall go-to. Oh my God, we need a warm body in the scene. It was Keith Olbermann. Keith always delivered. It was great. Yep. So Keith is there. To paint the picture in the control room, I'm on the back deck. I've got like a very Get Smart type office phone, not a shoe phone, but like a 60s. It's a beige phone with the lines, very officey, right?
Yep.
And it was to my left were the two CBS technical guys. One of the two would be there. You have to make sure everything's okay with because wasn't the technical guy. So they were the technical liaison. Me, Shecky, Kathy Mavrakakis, Paula, another producer, and Jude on the end, right? We're in the back deck. I'm sitting there, and right behind Jerry, all right, Jerry Foley, our incredible director, and monitors. People know what a control room looks like, and monitors, and it's all the different feeds. But because we were CBS, we had access to feeds at the broadcast center.
Absolutely.
So the broadcast center,
we
were on 53rd and Broadway. The broadcast center is on 57th and 10th Avenue, 10th and 11th Avenue.
That's Black Rock? Is that what it's called?
No. Black Rock was on 52nd. That's where my office was. The broadcast center was an old milk factory, believe it or not, 2 levels. And it took up the whole block between 10th and 11th Avenue. And that's where 60 Minutes happened and the morning show and Katie Couric, the evening news, right? And occasionally we would get those feeds that were coming in.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there watching Keith Olbermann, and we'll be back with more Keith after this. And there's a murmur going on, and I don't understand what's going on, because they're talking on walkie-talkies. Yeah, we're gonna punch it in. Hold on one second. And then I look at the screen and I see Katie Couric is interviewing John McCain. I'm thinking, this has got to be a fucking tape. This can't be happening now. Oh my God! So I know what they want to do. I applaud what they want to do. Right? I think it's brilliant, but holy shit. You can't just do that without me just making one phone call, not to stop it, but to say this is happening, because
a heads up has to happen.
By doing this, our feed is out there too. And if Dave's picking his nose or someone's doing something silly, that what's to stop one of the other CBS shows for taking that footage? It just becomes really ugly. But this, I think that was a great idea. So I hear them say they were about to take it. Someone tell Dave, I said, hold on, wait a second, right? And then I'm getting like pushback, right? And Jude and I go outside the control room to have this conversation. And I said, what I just told you, it's not going to happen. We're going to do this, but I have to call Leslie. I have to give him a heads up that, this amazing TV is going to happen. So getting back to what I said earlier, as far as managing my Leslie, I would never say, Leslie, what do you think we should do? That's not fair to him. He's not in the moment. So it's literally, I get under my deck, because that's the only phone that I had on that crappy little phone. And I'm whispering, it's like, McCain was supposed to be on the show. He canceled the last minute because he said he had to go back to Washington. But it turns out he's on Katie Couric right now. Dave's got the feed. We're about to put it up. It's going to be incredible TV. All right. I just want to give you a heads up. Okay, kiddo, great. Thanks. Boom. And then boom, it happens. And it happened at a time where somehow it got picked up I think we put it out because there was always that window of time where
Oh
as
yeah.
technology started to get wider,
Yep.
where you could actually have a website that might actually have streaming video. Because we went through, well, in 96, it wasn't there. And by I want to
Absolutely.
say 2004, whenever this was, it was, I think we might have even given something to Entertainment Tonight. Like we were feeding it because it was
Sure.
gold. Because Dave was,
Oh yeah.
what he did with that was amazing, right? I remember my wife calling me and going, "What is happening over there? Are you okay? Because I'm seeing this all over the news." I'm like, "You have no idea." But
It was
that was
one
a
of the
great
greatest
moment.
moments. It was one of the greatest
It was.
moments.
It was great. And then the great thing is, weeks later, whatever,
PS.
however it was, McCain coming on, and
Yep.
the road
I
to the
screwed
White
up.
House goes right here, right through here.
Yes.
Yeah, that
And
was
you know,
great.
you know
Good
what
times.
happened there? I screwed up, that little it was
Oh
such
my
a
God.
it was so good. And like you
And the
said,
thing
like
about Dave is he's so forgiving the minute people have the nerve to show up, right?
oh
Like I think he
yeah.
did it with Hillary too. There was a lot of badgering of Hillary.
Yep.
I think she shows up on the show she finally did was the night he went in for open heart surgery too, by the way. That was like another crazy night.
Oh, that's crazy.
The day before. Yeah. Oh my God, this is like an acid trip.
Good.
Back in
Excellent.
time.
I like that. I'll take that for sure. So I got to ask about Stern here because I can't go through if I get hit by a bus tomorrow and this episode goes out. I didn't ask you. I had Steve Weiner, who was one of the original writers on Late Night on, and then after he left Late Night,
Right.
one of the projects he had is he went to work for a few years for Robert Klein, who again,
Oh my
in my
God.
mind,
What did he do for Robert Klein? Did he write jokes for him?
one of his
Okay, got
writers
it, got it.
and
Yeah.
confidants, and he was one of his boys. Yeah, so I got him to his episode just came out as of this broadcast here. It's already out, and he did a phenomenal job talking about these two titans. And you've had a front seat. I want to ask about Stern. He didn't get to comedy sometimes. Oh my God, Vinny, we didn't get to anything.
We'll do that on part two. We can do
Okay, we'll do that on part
two.
two. So okay, but at this point, are you still working with Stern as well at the same time, or
Yeah. Oh, we overlapped for many years. Yeah.
So,
I see. I started working with Stern in '98, which
yeah.
was shortly after I started working with Dave, and I worked with Stern up until he left for Sirius, which was what 4, 6. I'm not even sure when he left.
Yeah, I mean, so I want to talk about like these are two of the most important broadcasters in history, and by the way, shout out to Alex Bennett. We love you, Alex. Appreciate you.
Love you, Alex.
And any roads that
Absolutely.
you paved that other people drove over, we appreciate it very much.
Alex, we could have Alex to thank for John Lennon's "Whatever Gets You Through the Night" because that was an expression that Alex used, and he did it on the radio often. And Lennon was notorious, like the Beatles' "Good Morning, Good Morning" from Sgt. Pepper was actually a Kellogg's jingle that Lennon heard one day, and it just kind of came through, and he put it in the song. He heard Alex Bennett say "Whatever Gets You Through the Night," and that seeded in Lennon's brain.
I mean,
so there you go.
Yeah, there we go. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate
so
you.
let me tell you how
Stern and Letterman.
How Stern came, how he actually came to CBS. So, Howard Stern, legend on the radio in New York, and which is interesting. I go back as a fan with Stern. My first job in 1982 was working at NBC, and I worked for WNBC's FM, the FM station WYNY. They were on the same floor. There were sister stations. You had AM and FM. If you remember,
shout out to Private Parts right there, everybody.
Dan Aykroyd bit, with the same DJ being the AM guy and the FM guy, like Jekyll and Hyde. It was amazing. Yeah. So my office was on the second floor, which is where our studio was, where the 9th floor, YNY, where SNL, there was a big window that looked down on 8H.
Yep.
Right. So just to paint the picture of how it was like being on a back lot in Hollywood, right? Letterman was on the 6th floor, but in 1981, when I was working at NBC, Howard was the afternoon guy, and their studio was on the 2nd floor where my office was, and there was a glass window. So if you remember Private Parts, where the tour is going through and they're playing, blank-a-doodle-doo, I'm gonna go and cock. Brett Summers, right? Match game. That was really what the setup was like. And I remember often looking through the window and seeing the engineer and Howard, and they were like, applauding and banging drums. That was like, it was almost like a zoo radio, like a parody of a zoo radio.
Yep.
But here's the cool thing. David Letterman had done the morning show.
Yes.
In that same building.
Yep.
I think
Yep.
maybe even in the same studio. Checky would know this.
I believe it was the same studio. Yeah.
Checky would know this. And then that show got canceled.
Yep.
And they had a holding deal for Dave, for to do something possibly at 12:30. So Snyder was in the building too. Tom Snyder was doing his show. So there's a lot of activity going on there.
Yep.
And so that's just kind of there were times where Dave and I would see Dave in the hallway, and I just knew him as that amazing comedian from the Don Kirshner rock concert. Remember Don Kirshner rock concert? They would feature not just music, but stand-ups. And I remember seeing Dave on that before I saw him on Letterman, on Leno, not Leno. God, on Carson. I am sorry. Old age is catching up with me.
Don't be.
There were times where, so Dave was just really kind of like George Costanza working on the Penske file, going into an office and just waiting for I guess, to find out what's going on. Right.
Yep.
But we would find ourselves both watching Howard Stern do his radio show, not even talking to just like everyone else. It was like, this is one of the novelties, the cool things that work in there.
Yep.
So, okay. So Howard becomes Howard, bigger, goes to K-Rock, which is owned by Infinity. Yep. Mel Karmazin, the general manager, his patron saint, the guy who supported him all those years. At a certain point, group, was it Viacom? Or it was Viacom. At a certain point, we buy Infinity, or we merge.
Yep.
And Mel Karmazin, now I'm like, wow, I work at the same company as Howard Stern because we're all in the same family.
Yeah, we're on the same
team.
I
remember seeing Mel in the building in Black Rock. So Black Rock is where our offices were. And I remember introducing myself to him saying, hey, Mel, so excited that you're part of this. I love Howard. We got to get him on CBS. And I'm just saying it like, what'd you say? You should put him on. I have zero authority. Sure. I have like nothing, no agency at all to even say this.
It's like me talking to Walter right now. It's the exact same. There's no, okay, that's nice, but
I think Mel said, and you are, Vinnie Favale, head of late night. How are you? Mel is very approachable. He's that guy, right? He goes, well, we should get together one day. We should talk. I'm like, oh, awesome, whatever. So long story short, we start conversations. I bring Leslie in. I say, Leslie, like maybe there's something we could do with Howard, So we have a meeting. Leslie, myself, and Mitch meet with Howard and Don, and talk about a Saturday night show, more of a syndicated show, not a network show, but more like the way syndication works. Like we own CBS owned stations where we can guarantee clearance in maybe a third of the country, but the biggest markets. And then you hope other stations pick it up. So. We ended up doing that. And I remember, so that's how I started working with Howard. Okay. So when you work with Howard, when you're in his life, you could absolutely remain anonymous on the air. There's very likelihood he will talk about meetings because he's very open that way.
Sure.
So, but I was like, I think what he liked, the fact that I was not your average network executive, right?
Yeah.
And I think
you were a fan first and it showed.
But he also liked the fact that, oh, wow, Letterman's guy is working on my show. Like that was kind of like, I don't know, maybe he didn't need the legitimacy. And it was also just kind of like an exaggeration. But yeah, I am Letterman's guy and I'm working on your show. And I remember one of the first things I did with Howard that he really, really liked. I remember thinking, we were just talking about what the show was going to be. Mitch, Howard, and I would meet frequently we'd meet in the studio after his show. And that's when I really started to learn about his work ethic. I'm like, this guy was up like at 5 a.m, to do his show at 6. And here we are, it's like 1 o'clock and he's still like, he would, I don't know if you remember, but his radio show would go on well past 10 o'clock, sometimes to 11:30. And we're having a meeting. And so in talking about the show, I was going, boy, it sounded a lot like the E! Show. This is really going to confuse a lot of people because Howard's making a big deal about it's like wrestling, right? Yeah. We're going to go against SNL. We're going to kill SNL. And I'm like, well, I'm not really quite sure we're going to beat the E! ratings at this point, because we're not delivering anything new, right?
Yeah.
So I remember the first thing where I think he was impressed with my thinking was, okay, we were trying to figure out what to call the show. I said, Howard, I know what we have to call the show. Let's just call it the Howard Stern Radio Show. So, like, I like the idea of meta again. I like the
Yep.
idea of let's just call it what it is. Our TV show was called the Howard Stern Radio Show. There was something kind of fun about that, and he loved that. Loved that. So we did the show, and I started to appear on it regularly because it was all part of calling in with the ratings and calling in from the bus and all the things that people might know me from the show. And then at one point, Jackie Martling, Jackie the Joke Man, left, and Howard said, "Hey Vin, why don't you sit in Jackie's chair for a week? Just you don't have to like just." And I'm like, "Oh, come on, I don't write jokes. I mean, just be yourself. I could turn to you. And it was like a life preserver for him. It's just like someone to go to. So it was amazing. So I'm sitting there. I got Fred to my left. I got Howard in front of me. I would always come in with an agenda. One time I came in with Q ratings. Let's talk about Q ratings. What that was a thing at the time.
Big thing.
And so I never took it for granted. I always prepared for it. And then it got to the point where I didn't have to be in the studio. I would be in frequently, but then I would call in or they would call me, and that was my relationship with that. And I think at one point, so one time, Howard did a tirade against Letterman because of some bad information that he had. Yeah. And it was a very wrestling-like, but you can't tell when you're listening on the radio. You don't see the wink, And I went in to defend Dave, and Howard just ripped me a new one. And it was actually very, very funny. And Dave called me to thank me, which I thought was like really, really cool. I think someone must have told them, "Hey, Vinnie really defended you on on Howard," which was nice. But then it's ironic that they've become best buddies now. That there was always a regard for each other. In fact, Dave was quite surprised because I always thought we had a regard for each other. I was really surprised he did that. But
this is a callback to you though, saying that Dave forgives people, especially when they sack up and they come on up and say, and Stern has done that. Like, how many times have you heard Howard Stern apologize for the things that he's done to Dave in the past? Like, I mean,
Howard has been that,
and Dave respects
because
that.
he evolved, the show evolves, he evolves, and all that.
Absolutely, we all learn.
But it was an amazing experience working for those two guys. And the thing, and I try to apply it to any project that I work on, my big takeaway from both Howard and Dave, they were surrounded, two things. They were surrounded by an incredible staff, right? Yes. Who worked tirelessly and knew what the brand was. I don't want to reduce Dave or Howard to a brand, but they knew what it was that they were working for, right? Yes. And but the other thing was those two guys worked harder than everyone else. And everyone else worked really, really hard. But they led from the front when it came to work ethic. You would think that if you're the CEO, like you own this thing, it's like, okay, I'll just come in for the show and I'll leave. Howard would be there. I remember working with Howard and then I was helping him develop the websites, the early days of internet stuff. And we were on the phone for hours and texting and emailing. And then I remember on a Saturday, like, remember AOL Messenger? Remember that? Yeah. I remember seeing an AOL Messenger. Hey, Vinnie, are you up yet? And it was like 6 a.m. I'm like, fucking Howard. Like, I got to it. Like, I'm so sorry I missed this. I'm thinking, all right, the weekend, we got to both have off, right? He was tireless, unbelievable, hardest worker. And the same with Dave. Dave was the first one there and the last one to leave. Just about every night.
I talked to somebody off camera about this because I remember when, I don't know when in the run it might have been 04, 05. It might have been after the heart surgery. But there came a time where Dave stopped coming to rehearsals and it made the news. And the person I was talking to off camera was saying that how frustrated they were hearing that because they made it sound like Dave was being a little bit diva-like, or he was still all the things he was still doing. Like how his work ethic was still, and Dave would even go out there and say, "Oh yeah, I've been phoning it in the last 3." He never phoned it in. That never happened.
No, and that all that stuff. Like even when I did my bit, and in the early days at CBS, he would be down there at the desk throwing the football to Mike McEntee, killing time back and forth, and then it's like, "Are we ready to go?" And then they'd run the bit. The CBS executive comes out and do the stuff and he'd get a kick out of it. What he liked, he didn't like, whatever. But then it got to the point where this guy, I mean, remember how much weight he lost when he came back? Like, it was like maybe he came back too soon, actually. It's like that was like a major surgery, obviously. And, the decision was made. It's like, well, listen, unless you're physically in any bit, that needs to be rehearsed, we could just tape this stuff and just show it to you. And by the way, show it to you in the dressing room where you're getting ready for the show. It's not
and
like
running through the monologue and sharpening that. It's not like he was a part of it.
Weigh in. And by the way, he weighed in and said, "Why are we using an actor? Let's have Vinnie do it." As an example.
There you go. And so not to get off Howard Stern here, because I mean, you got two, again, titans of broadcasting who in many ways could not be more opposite in their presentation. One who is open about absolutely anything and everything and willing to talk in gleefully, openly about these things. You've got this other guy with that, the term is, I guess, Midwestern sensibility, where a lot of things are kept private and but at the same time, they have all of these other characteristics, their ad-lib ability, their interview prowess, again, work ethic, and all of these things that are exactly the same, fearless as well, and also can attract people like you wouldn't believe, magnets, probably better word for that even.
Yeah, a lot of their guests were fans of them. Like people would be on Howard. And one thing that was really great, and I know Howard appreciated this when Howard Stern did on Sirius the Howard Stern years, like a kind of this long series about his life. I got the call from his producers, "Hey, we'd love Dave to do some stuff for it," right? And I was like, I never guarantee anything. That's always a tough sell. But Dave said yes, and it was great. And we recorded Dave talking about Howard, and he gave Howard credit for being the inspiration for Dave using his own mom on the show. He gave that all came. He said because Howard would do that on the early NBC show, the NBC radio shows. His mom would be on the air, and Dave listened to all that and thought that was great.
God damn, I wish that this hasn't been so much time, because I want to keep going and there's just so much meat on this bone. If there was a comparison that you could make between the two, what would that comparison be? And if there was any major differences between the two, what would it be?
I'd say very little differences. They're not even two sides of the same coin. Maybe the brand of comedy might be different,
sure,
but it's the same. They're the same. I think the biggest thing is they know who they are. Like they know, like when something rings false. If you pitch them a piece of comedy, or they not only do they know what's right for the show, but again, their closest people know what's right to take to them. If that makes sense.
I love that. And this won't be the last time we talk about this stuff. This is a conversation that's way bigger than this, than one podcast. We've got a commercial we're gonna shoot real quick. And then I'm gonna ask you about what you're doing now. And any of the projects that you have going on right now, because I think it's good to promote that. And then I got one final question on the way out. This is the commercial. You're going to like this. We have one only sponsor with the Letterman podcast. I'm not going to do commercials for dick pills and all that kind of stuff. I'm not at that place. We're trying to get this thing official, and that's what we want to have happen. Good. I'm not doing any of that stuff. However, there is one sponsor who has made their way through to us, and we said absolutely. There's one sponsor for the Letterman podcast. The Letterman's podcast is brought to you in part by the Hello Deli, Rupert G and the Hello Deli, and we're so delighted by this. We can't even tell you. Hey everybody, has your late show with David Letterman mug broken? Has your last late night with David Letterman show t-shirt gotten mothballs in it and now has the little holes in it? Fear not, you can actually there is one place that you can buy official late show with David Letterman merchandise, and it is at the Hello Deli. Rupert G and his business partner May, nestled within the womb of the Ed Sullivan Theater, are still serving amazing sandwiches and soup. If you're in the New York area, go see them. But if you want late show with David Letterman merchandise, or you're a fan of Rupert and you want some Rupert G t-shirts and things, please go to hello-deli.com. Here's a guy right here who has probably frequented the Hello Deli more times than I have McDonald's in my life. So anyway, there's our plug for Rupert right there.
Rupert,
really kind guy, right, Vinny? Like I take
Oh,
God
so
took the word kind and
unassuming,
made it into a man. Like,
so unassuming, and so not business oriented. Like there were times where, like, wait a second, your deli is in a building that has 400 some odd potential customers that are going to be let out around 6:30, but you're going to close at 6. Okay. I get it. I love it, but I love that about him. That's what
me
made
too.
him so special. I remember when Dave installed the slush machine.
Yep.
That was great.
Yep.
Good times.
We just appreciate Rupert so much, and
Yes,
he and his girlfriend Irene, and early adopters of our show, really supportive of what we're doing, and we couldn't be happier
fantastic.
to be linked up with Rupert.
He's
Just
great,
a hell of a guy.
and he's so nice. He'll take selfies with you. He'll do whatever
Oh,
you want.
I don't know if there's anyone in New York that takes more selfies with people that on a daily basis averaged out than Rupert G.
Right.
I mean, just the kindest person in the world. Vinny, you've been generous with your time here. I want to talk about, what are you working on now? So obviously that phase of the career has evolved into where you're at right now. What are the things that are keeping you, or waking you up in the morning with a spring in your step? What are you working on now?
Well, the big thing that I'm working on, I've worked on it for the last year, and it's probably going to be another year and a half before
Okay.
I'm done. It's epic. I'm working on the history. I'm writing a book on the history of Christmas music, going back to the beginning of time, like the oldest carols up until now. It's a deep dive. I finished the 70s. I thought I was done with the 70s and 80s, because I chose those chapters because there's a lot of music. It's all original music. So I'm it's the 70s has 100 songs, of which maybe the average person might know, 20 of them, right, from that decade. The stories are fascinating. The imagery is incredible. So I'm working on that. And I'm like, right now I'm doing this. Who knew the 60s, the 50s and 40s, each of those decades alone has about 300 original Christmas songs.
Each year?
Yeah. And some of them are incredible that people don't know about. So what I'm sorting it all out. And basically what I'm doing is I'm writing feature length stories, anywhere from like the Jingle Bell story was like 30 pages. Like, who knew Jingle Bells was written by a person who fought for the South, the Civil War, who was for slavery, and the song was debuted as part of a blackface minstrel show. Like, the lyrics
Holy
wouldn't
cow.
suggest it at all,
No.
which is why it's so popular. But its origins are very, very much of that world. So I'm finding all this stuff. It's fascinating, and when it's done, I'm hoping it will be like Ken Burns' Civil War documentary, that kind of epic project, awesome. Like multi-volumes and a podcast series and documentary. So that literally keeps me up at night, obsessing on it and trying not to get too overwhelmed. So I'm doing that. And I just co-hosted with my buddy Art Bell, who was the true founder of Comedy Central. We did a podcast series that's available wherever podcasts are streaming, called I forget, Constant Comedy. And we talked about the oranges because it was the 30th anniversary. Wait, the 30th anniversary of Comedy Central, Comedy Channel. We launched that in 1989. It was actually started as a Comedy Channel. So doing that, and I'm producing a 9/11 event in New York on Monday the 12th with Southside Johnny, the cast from Come From Away, just like a big fundraiser event. And that's it. And talking to you.
And well, hey, and I appreciate that, and open invitation anytime. It's of course clear you would have a podcast. You're an incredible broadcaster in your own right, and I appreciate this so much. Okay, before we leave,
sure.
I promised Shecky that I would ask you about a original phone call with the lady who would become your wife. About the original phone call with her.
Yeah, well, that's back with the Howard Stern days, right? Yeah. This is me sharing or oversharing with Howard something. This shows you what a true fan that I am. So remember Gary's tape? Yes. Remember the Gary apology tape? Yes. Which was amazing content for that show. Gary, hello. So I remember thinking, oh, I shouldn't laugh too hard. I got my own skeleton in the closet, and they were a series of videotapes that I made when I was wooing my my eventual wife. And they were basically just, hard on your sleeve, early days of video, the Betacam and a camcorder, video love letters, G-rated, but silly and a little bit cringy, more than a little cringy. And I remember having them, and I shared that with Gary, that I had done that, saying, "Hey, don't feel so bad, I did that." And Gary, in typical Stern fashion, pulled it out at a key moment, at a time when we were all beating up on Gary and said, "Vinnie, you shouldn't talk. You got your own stuff." And Howard's like, "What? Wait, what?" So I had to buy a beta machine on eBay, because I had the tapes, but I didn't have a way to play them.
Yep.
And I remember playing them, thinking, "How bad could they be?" Right. And my wife Debbie was dying. Like, I can't believe I married you. These are so douchey. They're so cringy and embarrassing. And Howard was like, "I want the tapes." I'm like, "Nah, you can't. They're just really bad." Vinnie. So I was like, "All right." And I gave him just, maybe 10 minutes of it. And the rest is history, because he plays them all the time.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So that's the story. Thank you, Rick. Wait till I dig up some of your skeletons. I think I might actually have real skeletons in his closet, so we have to be careful.
Well, he might, but they were probably used in films from the 30s.
Yes, exactly.
So,
from Hammer Films.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much for this today. I've got one obvious, dude, you're amazing. I appreciate this so much. I think you can probably see, I kind of wear my heart on my sleeve too when it comes to this. I think you can see the actual generosity and gratefulness pouring out of me right now. Thank you for this. Your generosity is unbelievable. We go out of the show the same way when we have folks like you as a guest. Obviously, we like the entire evolution of Dave. We love that he's doing the long form, the Tom Snyder-esque the stuff that he is doing right now with folks. If there's 3 people that you would love to see on my next guest, and Dave kind of do an hour with the produced video in the middle and all that, and just a phenomenal job top to bottom is what they're doing right now. If there's 3 people you would like to see him talk to in long form, who would those 3 people be?
See Dave talk to 3 people? Yeah. Oh,
don't worry about pop culture. Don't worry about it. Just hear from your heart. If there's 3 people that you would love to see on the next season of My Next Guest, who would they be?
Oh, okay. Give me a second, and then you can edit, right? You can tighten this up.
Sure, sure. I don't usually, but
did he have Dave Chappelle on?
He did.
Did they talk about, was it Dave Chappelle pre the trans controversy stuff?
It was right around the time of COVID, because when Dave went out there and did the show, he went out to the farm and did the show there, and everyone had the masks on and all that.
Right.
But Chappelle certainly, I think it's actually fascinating watching that episode through the lens right now of what's happening here, and just shows how damn strong a guy Dave Chappelle is, and how he stands up for his convictions. If you watch that episode, you can certainly see why, because convictions are something that have been a part of his life for his entire life.
Right.
So, but it would be cool to see a PS to that. Like, if you pick Chappelle again, to me, that's like, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I would do Chappelle now without even Dave challenging him, but just helping. Dave does that great thing of help me understand. Like that's almost his way of, I'm not sure I agree with you, so help me.
It's the curiosity
with you.
He comes at it with curiosity, no agenda.
I'd like to see that version now. Yeah. I'd love to see Will Smith now.
Yeah.
Because I know he had Will Smith again.
Yes.
Pre Oscars. That would be fascinating. And I'm trying to figure who that third would be. I don't think it should be an entertainment person, because he was so. You know who I would love? Oh God, Bob Dylan.
Oh yeah,
I would love. You ever see that picture? There's a great picture on the internet of Letterman, Liberace, and Bob Dylan. Like, it's a black and white photo. They were all, I guess, on one show.
Yeah.
But I am such a huge fan of Dylan. I think Dylan is a hero. Like, he's the guy. He's a international treasure. And the thing about Dylan is, I'm as much a fan of his interviews, stuff that from Rolling Stone, and as I am of his music, because he's so insightful, he's so smart.
Absolutely.
And I don't know what kind of an interview would be. I don't know if he would be vague with Dave or whatever. That would kill for that. That would be.
Could not agree more. And there are polarizing folks like that. Tom Waits is a guy who's like that as well.
Yeah.
And have history. They both all have history with
Yeah.
Dave's shows, and I think that's a phenomenal answer.
Yeah, that would be incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Vinnie Favale, if anybody wants to find you, search you, social media presence, anything like that, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Twitter, Instagram is VP Favale, which is not for Vice President East Coast. It's Vincent Peter Favale. So VP Favale on Twitter, Instagram, and then Vinnie Favale on Facebook, YouTube, or my website, vinniefavale.com.
Perfect. Safe to say, not a weasel, not a pinhead. The perfect guy to take over when you did take over, and with all the ups and downs that we have seen, I'm so grateful that you have been willing to share some of these stories, and I can't wait for more. I want to support every project you're doing as well.
Thank you so much.
This is really cool. It's been a real kick for me, Vinnie. Thank you.
And I'll be happy to come on again and talk not stuff related to me. Just talk about Dave. If you ever do a deep dive in an episode or the Will It Float offshoot, like whatever you guys want to do,
I appreciate that like you wouldn't believe. I'm going to do the quick outro here, and then
sure.
As soon as I hit stop, you and I can say our goodbye privately.
Great.
But there we go. That's why we do what we do. This is a perfect example for anybody watching why we do what we do. The content of this show is exactly it. We love taking some of these moments that have happened in the past, and were thrown away so quickly because there was another show the next day, and dusting them off the ground, blowing them off and going, oh my God, look at these gold nuggets. Look at all of these things, plus the story behind the story. We celebrate the greatest body of work, broadcasting work in history. That is the work of David Letterman and company. The company, just as important or almost important, maybe 51 to 49. There's Dave, and then there's the company as well. All of the people, the family that put this together. A prime example of that today, everybody. This has been another episode of the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Our guest today, Vinnie Favale. Thank you very much for coming and watching this. Thank you and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.